Hey, everybody, we have a special edition of Gold Rush Live. We're also with Sean from All Star Options, and we got a special guest for you guys today, the author of um, Trading Options for Dummies. And today we want to kind of stick to the core theme how people blow up trading, how many mistakes are made from traders who trade options, because everybody knows a trader who's blown up using options. This guy here has also done that as well. So, many years later, you learn how to do it. These guys are the kind of the masters. If I want to go to two people who really know what they're talking about options, these two guys are the people that I would go to talk to. So, Sean, Joe, what are some of the worst mistakes traders make when they first start trading options? We'll go Sean first. We'll go start with Sean.
Well, how much time do we have? Because I have a long list of mistakes I've made as an options trader.
Let's hear it.
Geez, I don't even know where to start. I think one common mistake I have repeated throughout my options trading career is I have had it in my head that I can build some type of premium selling strategy that can pay me consistent dollars every single day. And it works for a little while and then it fails miserably every single time. I think a lot of options traders are probably like me and they fall into a similar trap. But I don't know. That's the one that's the top of my mind right now. But there's a million of them. Joe, I'm sure you've got a bunch as well.
Well, mine is that I'm primarily a chartist in the sense of I look for specific setups, and so I see a stock chart that looks perfect, and so my instinct is I'm going to buy a call on that thing, and instead of wasting time and buying the shares, and what happens is that the stock either does absolutely nothing or uh, the stock takes off, and for whatever reason, because of liquidity or some sort of glitch, or because nobody's really interested because the stock's too thinly traded, the option just dies, And so I'm at $300 instead of having bought the shares. Which are up 300-400 bucks if you bought 100, 100 shares of it. There's a clear distinction between buying stocks and buying calls and things like that. The other thing too is the flip side is puts. And of course I'm talking in general, basic terms here, but you think a stock is going to crash and you buy the put, you're gonna buy that boat with that with that with the profits, and nothing happens. So that's why I lean more towards income production rather than speculation with options.
Okay. Interesting. Joe, I have a question. This is going to sound like a pointed question. Um, I live in Colorado. I run a long going traders meetup group here. We get together a couple times a month, and I get all kinds of traders who come. I get very experienced traders who've been doing that a long time. I get people who've never placed a trade ever, but they're curious and they're interested. And because I trade options and people know that I trade options, I get people asking me all the time, "Hey, do you have a good options book I could read?" And my standard answer to most of those people is, man, options books are tough. There's no good options book. They're also arcane and they're heavy on the math and they're heavy on the theoreticals, and it's like work. It's like I'm back in college reading these books. I'm curious. You've taken a different tack with your style of writing. Um, did you make it? Did you purposely set out to write a book that is a little bit more plain English for people?
Well, you got the book is it's in its fourth edition now. Okay. It's kind of a convoluted story. I wrote the original book, and then I stopped writing it. Someone else picked it up, and then a couple of things happened, and I got the book back. So I had to revise all the stuff that the second author had undone, you know, and because of time pressures, the my comeback edition wasn't exactly what I was wanting it to be. So over time, Um, I've and I read those Amazon reviews, which sound like what you just said. I don't want to be in math class. So over time, I have, certainly through experience and uh, just putting in the effort, trying to make it simple. And I'm currently working on the fifth edition, and this one, I'm really working on making it. If this happens, do this, and taking out all the theoretical nonsense that can be, can go along with an options book.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people come to options and they're immediately hit over the head with all the scary words, right? Like all the Greeks, all the volatility stuff, all the third level math, and it's like uh, they they're overwhelmed. And so the first thing they ask for is, what's a book I could read? How can I wrap my head around this? And ultimately my advice is the best way to learn options is just to start trading options and start making a bunch of mistakes. Start putting trades on and have them not work. And you're wondering, why didn't this work? I had the direction right. Why isn't this thing going? Why aren't I making money? That's when you really start to,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
there's no substitute for hands-on. And one of the things I harp on all the time is paper trade. And I know that's not very exciting, you know, but if you're trying to learn how to do something and it's going to cost you money, because you know how options are. It's a quirky business. The algos are out there trying to take your money, and guys like you and me are out there trying to take other people's money. It's kind of a Shark Tank type situation. Uh, you and like you say, you're going to have that strategy that's going to work three, four times, and the fifth time it doesn't work. So take your time, put on some paper trades, and then go slow. Don't be buying 10 contracts. Don't be setting up multiple contract spreads and things like that. Go one contract at a time, kind of get your feet on the ground and progress slowly. Yeah.
But then human nature comes in, and that's the problem. Is like that because for me, it's like, yeah, like speaking of mistakes people made, how about the buying call options into earnings, thinking the stock will go up? That's probably the worst one I used to do is go, and you'd be right. You could be right and be. I remember this was a long time ago. I forget which stock it was, but I bought put options on it. I was like, okay, the earnings are going to be bad. Probably got it right by accident at that point, honestly. Stock ends up crashing really hard. It went down 20%. And I remember like it's way past my strike price, but there's no volatility. So like the price of the options just went down. I got cut in half, and I'm
Yep.
just sitting there like, what did I do wrong? And like when you understand it, like you know exactly what you did wrong today, but like back then you don't. So then, like, the part that's always hard about options is that human nature comes in. And then you start to go, if I just took this option, I could spend this amount of money and make this amount of money. So how do people combat that, Joe? How do people kind of combat their, own bias, and they're also a liability to themselves at times. So how do they combat that to do something different?
Well, you have to have a bit of a system or at least a thought process. And I've been doing this since 1987, one way or another. And when I trade options, I rarely trade more than one contract at a time. You know, uh, and that's because I set a goal before uh, I put on the trade. Like for example, if I'm looking for income, and I set up a spread, and the thing says, maximum gain is $1,000. Well, then I set a goal, a ridiculously low goal, like when this thing makes a $200 profit, I'm out because that's $200 in my pocket. And I actually try to um, match a trade to something. Okay, if I make $200 here, that's $200 that's going to go to my car payment. You gotta that's a bit unorthodox. I understand that because when people are trading, they're not thinking about that. But if you don't have some sort of anchor to reality, then you're not able to make those tough decisions. Like this thing's going against me. I'm out. You know, I'm out $100. I don't want to lose anymore. It's a cruddy trade. I made a mistake. I'm out. Move on to the next one. You gotta set those boundaries. And for me, anchoring trades to reality is the way to work.
Joe,
Is the way it works.
that's really interesting, and I see both pros and cons to that. Yeah, obviously, the conventional wisdom is that you don't want to be quote unquote trading with your rent money, right? Because if you're trading with your rent money, then you're likely to make bad mistakes because you're going to be too emotional, right? You should be trading with money you can afford to lose, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's the conventional wisdom. Now, I do see value in what you're saying is, you make $200 and that's my car payment or whatever. And the reason I agree with that is I can speak from experience. I started trading in the late 90s and I worked at a prop trading firm, and we were a bunch of 20-year-old kids who were exploiting some inefficiencies in the NASDAQ market, and we were making boatloads of money. I mean, we're talking about 20-year-old kids with no Wall Street experience pulling down five figures plus every month. I mean, we're talking 50,000 a month, 100,000 a month, just ridiculous money. And the one thing that I had found that we all kind of observed about ourselves is that we suddenly became completely divorced from reality. Like we could not relate to any of our non-trader friends. Like when I would go to a happy hour with my friends who are not traders and I would be, upset that I only made $500 today. They'd look at me like I'm an asshole. Like, what's wrong with you? Some people don't make that in a month, and it's just, we became completely divorced. So I like what you're saying there about trying to keep yourself grounded in reality when you're looking at your trading profits, trying to draw a straight line from, hey, this profit here is going to pay for this in real life. And I don't know. I feel like it's going to be hard for a lot of people to do that, but I like where you're going with that.
Well, so here's what makes that concept super easy. If you divide your investing and trading endeavors into two categories, one is long-term wealth building, the other one is current income, then that makes things easy. When you're building long-term wealth, you have a totally different approach. You're a bit more patient. You give positions a lot more time to mature. If you're paying your rent and your car payment from trading, and a lot of people do that now after the pandemic because everything has changed. There's a lot more people that actually trade for a living now. And that's one of the things that has evolved in my writing, and in my trading. I understand you shouldn't trade options unless you're willing, unless it's money you can lose. That's perfectly feasible. But on the other hand, if I have to trade options to pay my car bill, then that's the approach.
Right. All right. So Joe, you're the author of Options for Dummies. So let's dummy it down a little bit. So when you come across a person who's, discovering options trading for the first time, where should they focus? Do we have any go-to strategies that a newbie trader should try to, make their own and hone that craft before they start getting into any of the more advanced stuff?
Well, so that's a great question because one of the things I always talk about, and as I mentioned earlier, is you paper trade. So, go ahead and try a couple of things, anything, buy calls, sell puts. If you want to, maybe set up a spread or two here and there, as you get a little bit more advanced, go ahead and do that on paper. The thing is, again, do it enough times, either on paper or with small amounts of money so that you get a feel for things. And you got to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take you 10, 15, 20 trades to get a feel for how this thing actually develops and what you can actually get out of it.
Yep.
So if I tell people, okay, start by buying calls because that's the easiest thing to do. Then we go back to the story I told at the beginning. The stock went up 20 points and the options didn't do a thing. So it's as you well know, it's a
Yep.
quirky business and you just have to, one thing at a time. But pick one thing, even if it's something that might be beyond your expertise at the moment, and just work it out and work through the kinks on paper or with small amounts of money, knowing full well that you're going to get your butt kicked as you learn.
So, Joe, uh, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I want to let you answer it. When someone is new to options trading, there's a tendency to, want to learn about all the different spreads and the different combinations you could do to express bets, whether volatility is high or low, and all that stuff. Is that is that a good avenue for someone to do to try to become a multi-tool player, or should they really just kind of focus on one strategy and do their best to, master that and then maybe move on to something else?
I am a firm believer in keeping it simple. Okay. Master that strategy or debunk that strategy. You know what? That doesn't work for me. I'm going to move on to the next thing. But I don't advise people trading multiple strategies at a time without understanding what each one of them is all about before moving on.
Hmm. Okay.
I agree with that. I mean, if you just think about any type of trader, whether you're like me, you're running multiple systems, multiple strategies, or you're a person doing options, or you're a person in stocks, like, you kind of have to start one at a time. For me, learning all the different strategies that I run today, it's just a time thing. I didn't start there. I started with you maybe start with trend and then maybe you go to mean reversion, but like you have to kind of master them one at a time, or at least figure it out. Like there's no such thing as mastering, but figuring out to a point where you can be profitable is everything, and then you can go to add the next thing. So I like what you said there.
Well, Jason, I'd like to add to what you were mentioning before about how, when you were new to this, you would buy, you'd have a directional bet on, you think the market's going up, you'd buy a call and the market goes up and you don't make any money. And you're like, what? How did I not make any money? And I think the hardest thing that newbie traders come across is they underestimate the impact that volatility has on their trades. They think they could just buy a call and if the stock goes up, I'm going to make money. But no, not if volatility collapses, which often happens in something that's rising because volatility is not all, this is not always the case, but often volatility is coming down as something rises because people aren't afraid of something that's rising. People who are invested in that stock are just they're happy, they're content. It's fear comes in when stocks are going down generally, and that's when people bid up the prices of options. But they underestimate the impacts of volatility and that's where they're screwing up. And Joe, I'm curious how do you introduce dummies, to use your words? How do you introduce dummies to volatility?
You know, Bollinger Bands, okay? That is my favorite volatility indicator. Now it's not a direct connection to options. It's not the classic IV or HV, but it's
Yep.
visual, and I'm a visual person. And the Bollinger Bands, as everyone knows, you have your 20-day moving average or whatever moving average you want, and you use two, three, four, five standard deviations above and below. And when those bands start to shrink around prices or collapse around prices, that's a decrease in volatility that predicts some kind of a big move. Now, you can't tell usually whether it's going to be a big move up or a big move down, but something's about to happen. So if anyone wanted to get a grip on volatility before trading options with the traditional volatility measures, the Bollinger Bands are my preferred indicator for that.
And so for newbies or dummies that are watching right now, when the Bollinger Bands are coming together, when they're tightening, you're generally looking to get long options and bet on a volatility expansion. And conversely, when the bands are wide, are you typically betting on volatility coming in? So maybe you're selling premium, you're selling, out of
Yeah,
the money calls and puts.
it all depends on what the general market is doing as well, I mean, if for example, you're looking at the S&P 500 and it's rising, you know, and suddenly it starts going sideways, and the volatility bands start to shrink, if you've been up 20, 30% before the band shrink, well, the odds are that the big move isn't going to be up. So at that point, you start looking, you start exploring something to the downside.
Mm.
Simple stuff like you might want to buy a put, or set up a bear spread, or something along those lines. But I try to connect the visual and the market trend to my option strategies. If market's going up, I'm not going to be doing bearish strategies. If the market's going down, I'm not going to be doing bullish strategies. And sometimes I don't want to do any strategies at all because the market's just going up and down like a yo-yo.
Hmm. Now, do you find yourself having a bias towards either being short options premium or being long options premium, or are you dependent on market conditions to inform which way you're going?
I have no bias, and thanks to reading Jason's stuff over the last few months, I've completely thrown all my biases away. I look at the charts more than ever now to figure out, which way I ought to try. And if I can't figure it out, I just don't trade.
Hey, that takes a lot of discipline. There's a lot of people who can't do that.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Hmm.
And sometimes I still make the mistake and jump in when I shouldn't. Uh, but that's the goal, I can't make heads or tails out of this. I'm out of here.
Yeah, it's funny. Just literally today, Jason, one of my option strategies that I employ, I went completely to cash today. I just closed it down because I was like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm not feeling right about it, and so I've been in cash in that strategy all day today, and I do find myself like, oh, I should put a trade on. I should do something. I got, I'm getting itchy, but no, you got to sit in your hands sometimes.
It's the hardest thing to do for all of us. I think that's for me as running so many different strategies, I could buy options, I could sell options, I could buy futures, whatever. And so I always, like, when I first started doing this, part of my goal when I was a lot younger was going, okay, well, I could do all these different trades and there will always be a trade probably. And that's just not true. Now my portfolio is more boring than ever. I'm more profitable than I ever was, but my portfolio is boring. Meaning, trade goes on here and there, very, only when things are looking perfect and the setup is actually giving the right signal. But it's a superpower. Like we were talking about earlier, it's discipline, but it's also a superpower to be able to just sit on your hands and be in cash and go, a trade will come. I mean, think of the pullback that just happened in the market after Liberation Day. If the market crashing down, everybody wants to get short. By the time everybody's short, the market's bottoming. Then it's going up and everybody's buying calls, and basically near the top. And now it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do now? What if it turns over? What if it rolls over for a minute? A lot of people just are very late and they're undisciplined in their trading. And as you guys, as options traders, like, that's everything. The ability to sit on your hands and put it on at the right time is so important for trading options. I can't stress that enough. Even for myself, I made a rule for myself about, what was this? Maybe about 8 years ago now, which was when I buy options, I'm only going to buy options probably once or twice a quarter. That's it. That's all I'm allowed to do. That's all I allow. Because like buying a call or a put, like you have to have some big bet on that you really think is going to move in a very liquid market, that you think it's going to do the thing within that amount of time. Those don't come up a lot. So after starting to go to that, like, my options trades were way more profitable just because I'm always just looking for the perfect setup. The thing I always tell traders is, if you are buying options, one a month, try one a month at most, and see how you do, because it'll make you wait. At the very least, it'll make you wait for the perfect setup to do it. And then you can finally go to other areas and find other things. And then maybe you could be like a Sean or a Joe one day and understand how to employ different strategies all the time. But
Jason,
too many people go too hard too soon. Go ahead.
Jason, you said something here that just really sparked a profound insight in me right now. It's crazy. But you talk about timing. All right. What are two things that we are beaten over the head with all the time about investing? One, you cannot time the market. Two, it's the time in the market that matters. Well, guess what? With options, it's just as hard to time the market, and timing is so damn important because The time, you don't have unlimited time. There's an expiration date on whatever option trade you put on. Options expire. So you got the two best things about investing working against you. You got time working against you, and you got timing working against you because timing is so damn hard. Jason, my head just exploded. This is why options trading is so hard.
It is.
But
It
but
is.
then but then if you add that caveat, I need that $100 to pay my car bill. I just made $100. I'm out of here. You know, that's a solution so that you can fight the market's design that way.
Joe, you'll love this. I had a friend, an options trader, or sorry, a stock trading friend back in my early days. I worked in this prop trading firm, like I mentioned earlier, and we were trading stocks. So it's not an options thing, but he had that mindset, and he was the best at it. This was probably the best trader I've ever known, and he had a personal rule. His rule was, I want to make $500 a day, and as soon as I make $500 that day, I'm out the door. And there were some times, Joe, where he would make that $5 in the first 5 minutes, and sure enough, boom, he turned his computer off. He's like, see you guys, I'm going to go out on my boat. Like that was the rest of his day. Some days he was there all day till the end or close to the end, but he was so damn disciplined about that. And it was impressive. We all kind of rided him because like, man, at that time, a bunch of us were making a lot of money by hanging around all day, but he was Mr. Consistent. He knew what he wanted. He didn't need any more. He was a simple guy. He's like, if I can make $500 a day, then I've got everything I need in life. And that's what he did. Unbelievable.
I wish it was that. I wish it was that easy for me or and for many people to do that. But that's it's a different take on my thing with the car payment. You know,
Yeah.
and I see people's eyes glaze when I go, well, just think about it in terms of your car payment. Oh gosh, here we go again with the car payment thing.
You gotta say Lambo. Then they're like, yeah, that's because that's honestly like what people like are driven to when they first start trading is like they want to talk to Joe and Joe's gonna give them the options trade. And that trade is going to buy them the Lambo or the boat or the car they want, something. So saying something like a car payment, they're like, wait, I'm only gonna make a couple $100. Well, yeah, per trade, if you can do that per trade, that is income, like so once again it's a slow game. It just doesn't happen quickly. So let's hop into this. We got to go in a little bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your new book, Joe. So you got a new book coming out. I think you mentioned it's coming out next month, right?
Uh,
So can you tell me a little bit about this?
Sure. As I understand it, it's supposed to come out on June 8th. And it's primarily written for young people in their 20s and 30s that are just getting started out. And as with the options book, this is the third edition. So, it's evolved. It was a very basic book at the beginning, the first time I wrote it, but now after the pandemic, when everything has changed, I've divided it into two sections. One is build your long-term wealth. That's your 401k, your IRA, and all that. And then somehow develop a system for current income. And you can do that with short-term trading if you get good at that. You can do that with options if you get good at that. And then you get to a point where you separate yourself from the market and you build a portfolio of tangible investments like real estate. So really, what this book does, well, as far as I've seen, not too many books are doing that these days, is teaching people a method of taking the stock market and turning it into a wealth building apparatus and an income producing apparatus.
No, I love it because I think it's something that a lot of people don't get, which is that type of education. One, a lot of people don't get that from their parents. Nobody really, I mean, I'm sure a couple people do, but most kids don't get it in schools. And then as you get older, it's like, you're just kind of thrown out there and you're told to make money and you don't really know what to do with it. So
Yeah.
books like these really help people do that. Sean, I know we got to go in a few. Do you got anything to end on? It's all up
Um,
to you. It's all up to you, Sean.
oh man,
It's on your
no,
shoulders.
no pressure, no pressure. Look, the audience here, I suspect, are people who are, new to options trading, And I think if you're going to get new to options trade, if you're going to explore options trading, just do it, but do it small. Okay. Paper trading is an option. Sure. I prefer just real trading, maybe just trade one lots, you know, buy option contracts that cost you less than $100. And so you're not risking a whole lot of money because you really need to, you need to feel what it's like to put a position on and get the direction right and still not make money. And then that leads, then that leads you down a rabbit hole of understanding why and starting to understand volatility, which is the big piece of options that is kind of like the big dark hole for a lot of people, myself included sometimes. Um, so you just need to get your feet wet. And it's okay to get your feet wet, and it's okay to make mistakes as long as you make them small. Don't be swinging for the fences. Don't be YOLOing, putting your entire account in a 40-cent option that's, way out of the money, hoping for a home run. Sure, it could work. But no, you gotta keep it small and start with start with just simple buying calls when you're bullish, buying puts when you're bearish. Maybe when you're ready to graduate to some spreads, maybe you start exploring with vertical spreads, which is like when you buy a call, then you sell a further out of the money call to lower the cost. Those are good first steps, and just be easy on yourself, man. This is hard. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no easy way to make money in options. I'm sure Joe would agree with that. Everything is a learning curve. You're gonna take your lumps. Just be easy on yourself.
The one thing I'd like to end on, bringing it all back around,
Please.
um, I have taken out the formula for the Black-Scholes model from the book.
Hallelujah.
Okay. It's not there anymore. And so you don't have to be afraid of the weird calculus stuff in the book. So just wanted to get that in there.
No, and look, every any options newbie who's interested in learning is going to thank you for that because, like I said earlier in this broadcast, there's so many options book out there, and I've read most of them, and they all suck. And I'm not picking on any one author. They're doing the best they can, and they're trying to give everybody everything, and that's fine. But you don't have to be a calculus expert to make money in options. Sure, it could help, it might help, but you don't need that to be an options trader. So
I
focus on
couldn't
what
agree.
works.
I couldn't agree with you more.
All
All
right,
right,
guys.
Jason, bring it home.
Hey, that was great. Just want to thank you again, Sean, for coming and doing this with me. Joe, thanks for being a guest. As always, I always enjoy our talks and just learning from you, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. We'll see you guys soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.